Okay, so quick recap. Hopefully, if not, that's fine. Let's get this through. We want to know the area of rectangle. And then we want to do the next page, you might have seen over the page, is the area of triangles. Now, first off, however, I want to ask you, what does it mean when I ask you to find out the area of any shape? What does that actually mean?
Right, like how much space it takes up?
Yeah, how much space it is. Do you know how we measure how much space something takes up? Yeah. Anyone else? Then we'll rely on you. Anyone else? Chad? What you're giving me now is potentially a formula for a rectangle, right? Which I'm not going to say is wrong, but it just in general, think back to probably even primary school, the first time you looked at area. How do we measure, how do we determine how much space? What is this?
Well, you have to take out. You have to like the formula to find out how much
Mass.
space it takes measure.
Okay. So mass, do you know what mass is? Not really. No. Mass, I would say, is what the science teachers will tell me off if I ever call them weight.
Oh, if
Things don't have weight, they have mass. So two-dimensional shapes can't have mass. Three-dimensional objects can have mass. Yeah. And I'm always very careful when I say, what's the weight of something? Your science teacher will come back to me and tell me the same weight. So volume is how much space it takes up in three dimensions. So
but
area is just blank, just two dimensions. So my question, Chase, do you need that out? Is that a good thing to have? Yeah. I just remembered whether you remember count. Oh, I wondered whether you remember counting squares when you did area originally.
I do.
Some of you did.
Yeah, you count the squares on either end and kind of them together.
Potentially, yeah. But actually, that what you're telling me, and this is one thing we have to be careful about, we can't do the same thing for every shape. However, every shape, it's about trying to work out how many small squares it takes. So just before we do this sheet, can I get you in your maths book, please, to write something down for me? Okay. You're gonna need. Do you need it now? Would it help?
No.
Would it help to start a fresh one now?
No.
Box there. I know it's a bit wasted. When we do the area, even if we're not actually counting squares, our answer will always be how many squares are taken up. All right? Make sense? Now, those squares could be tiny, tiny squares or bigger ones. Right? We count squares. We could have millimeter squares, which we would say millimeter with a little 2. Okay? They could be centimeter squares, which is a centimeter with a 2. We could have meter squares, which would be a meter, and we actually go all the way up to kilometer squares. All right? The square kilometers. So what we're doing is we look at a shape and we figure out, oh, how many squares would go in that? Now, some shapes, it's really easy to count how many squares there are, right? What's probably the easiest shape to count the number of? You don't need to do that, Chase. You've got a new book. Do that at home in your own time. What's the easiest shape to count squares in? A square. Yeah. right? We just count how many squares are in a square. What's the next easiest shape? A rectangle. Starts getting a bit harder when the shape goes triangles and pentagons, and then when we get curved lines and things like that, it's even harder. But technically, we are still counting how many squares the shape covers. Yeah? So if we had a grid on a sheet of paper, or anywhere, let's say there was a grid. Do we use grids in real life, by the way? So
Yeah.
for the field or anything like that? We kind of do, but we have them on a map, don't we? Well, what do we do with a map? We draw a grid and then put all the land on it. And why is that? Well, because that works out how much space there is, and so we use these square grids to work out how much space the shape takes. So basically, for every shape, we have to count squares. Now, some shapes it's easy, some shapes it gets harder. Therefore, we can't do the same thing every time. Now, let's just do the simplest one that we've got to start with, which is a rectangle. So we just drew a rectangle on the grid, because I've covered exactly the grid. Drawing a rectangle, how many squares does that cover over? You can do whatever you like on your paper, don't do exactly the same thing. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there are 12 squares going along, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lots of squares going down. So we would say 12 lots of 7 squares, or 7 lots of 12 squares, equals 84 squares. Is it always 84 squares? Because look what I do with my paper. You can't do this on yours, but look, if I do this, how have I changed it? I've not made it smaller, not changed it. I've made the squares bigger. What's the area of this one now? Eh? Well, what would you do?
It's just 4.5 times 6.
So 4. So what? 3 lots of 6 and.
No, not 27. It's 10.5.
4. It's actually 3.5, isn't it? That's right.
Oh, yeah.
3.5 lots of 6 equals. What do you get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 larger squares. What if I do this? I don't think I can change it differently. So that's the biggest. I could go in the middle.
What's that, like 5 sixes? 5.
Harder, right? We're not going to worry about it. But let me just ask you this then. Which of those two answers here is correct?
Both.
Both. Why both of them?
Because thinking the side of the square. It's not like they're just different.
This is where this bit, this is called the unit of measurement. So I said we could do whatever, we could do square millimeters, we could do centimeter squares, square meter squares, or kilometer squares. The unit determines the number. Yeah, but it doesn't change the area. That's why it's actually super important. It states the units when we talk about area. All right. So you'll notice on this worksheet that I've given you, it's got the units. But does that make sense? So what we're doing is we're counting squares. Now you guys, you came up with a shortcut instead of counting all the squares. What did you do? Why did you do that?
You multiply two times that much, then the full area of the other two sides is the same. So when you multiply them, it's the
So do you think? If you were focused on this, it wouldn't matter, right? Do you think, Carly, did you get what Kenzie just said? Yeah? Yeah? Because you summarised what you said.
She
What
said
Kenzie just
the
said.
one I just said.
Yeah.
Well, I
Oh,
was
it's just you were laughing at Carly, I thought you knew it. Okay. Let's summarise then. So what Mackenzie said was we multiplied those two numbers because it's 7 lots of both. Right. Do you think that method will work for all shapes? Why not?
shapes like triangles or shapes, it won't have the same amount of, like, it may have halves or quarters of squares. And that, if you try to multiply that together.
Now, that's actually a super important point. A lot of people learn how to work out the area of a rectangle and then go, oh, I'm just going to do that all the time. It's important to understand that, should we write this down? The area of a rectangle can be worked out by doing its width multiplied by its length. That's because it's very easy to, that's how many squares there are. Yeah? So in this case, the area was going to be 7 times 12, which equals 84, whatever the units are, squares, yeah? Whatever square units that are. If we haven't been given a unit, we can just write unit, but we should always put it. So I should have finished the word rectangle. So width times length. So that is the formula for a rectangle. But it's not the formula for anything else. Necessarily. Okay? You're going to have lots of formulas to remember for lots of different shapes. How do you think you'll manage with that? You're going to go, no problem, Mr. Potts, because we know those formulas are going to be on our yellow sheets. Yeah? That's what happens. You tend to not have to remember the formulas for shapes and things anymore because it's in formula books. I can even show you the NYP one. A lot of them are in there. Maybe not the most basic ones. Some we have to learn eventually, but a lot of the hard ones, the formulas are given to you. So on your yellow sheets, for instance, you can write down the formula, but we still have to learn how to use them. We can have all the formulas in the world if we don't know what they mean. It's no good. Anyway, area of a rectangle. Does anyone remember the area of a triangle? Formula? No? Okay. Well, before we talk about it then, I'm just going to get you to work out things. So, the first one I'll do with you, what's the answer to? What's the area? Area equals 8 times 11, which is 88, and it's, we say, square miles. MI for miles. Alright? Now I'm going to tell you now, and you can write those. If you don't write the unit afterwards, this one, well, it's not completely correct. It's not wrong, it's not completely correct. So you would lose credit, lose mark. Okay? Do I need to do the next one, or are you good for all of the rest? You go for it. Go. Have a look at Smart's. just checking as well, not just your numbers, but your units. Right? So number 2, we've got the area equals 9 by 9, which is 81, and it's the inches, square inches, we would say, rather. Well, it's okay if you wrote square inches, but I saw on yours you were writing inches and then square or inches square. So we'll get into the habit of having our unit, even if we wrote 81 IN squared, like that, I'll carry on like that from going forwards. So we've got the area for this one is 5.8 times 5.8, what do you get? 33.64, and it's square inches. Next one, the area equals 4 times 4, which is 16 square feet. So a lot of people will put the FT because it's there and they'll forget the little 2, and that's where I'd have to circle it and mark it on. So be aware of that. This one, area is 2 times 2, which is 4 square meters. This one, the area would be 4.2 times 8, which is
It's 4.8.
4.8 times 8. Oh, 4.2, sorry, yeah. The answer?
3.6.
Should be more than 32. 33.6, that's right. And it's square yards. Number 7. 5.4 times 5.4, which is number 6. Square inches. This one I've got my area is 2.3 times 6, which is 13.88 square yards. And then we've got area is 7 by 7, 49 square centimeters. And finally, we've got area is 3.3 times 4.7, which is 15.5 square. Yeah, just a quick question before we move on. Which rectangle is bigger? This one or this one? Which one's bigger, 9 or 10? What do you think, Melissa? 9 or 10 bigger? 10? What do you think? 9? You think 10? What do you think, so? 10? What do you think, Kate? 10? 10? Why? Unit of measurement, yeah? 1 centimeter square. Exactly. That's why the units are important. The actual physical square on the screen is smaller, but the units tell us this is a huge, big rectangle, isn't it? This is like the size of a field, like a huge field in Mid-America when they grow all their corn and stuff. And this is about the size of 49 square centimeters. Would probably fit on a. Yep. Right. What we want to do now is work out the area of a triangle. What we're going to get you to do is this task here. We don't need to move into groups or anything, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with a rectangle on a grid. We've got square paper. Okay. You are going to draw yourself a rectangle that size. So a 4 by 6 rectangle. Could be, but if I make it bigger, I think, yeah, probably in your book, it's going to be centimetres, isn't it? If I do that, look. It's still 24 squares, but it's a bigger rectangle, isn't it? Bigger squares. All right. So, what we're going to do is we're going to use this to work out something about triangles. Any triangle. So, basically, the instructions are, what you have to do is pick one of these points down here on the rectangle, one of these. So, on your table, all right, so it doesn't really matter. You're going to pick a point. Let's say I pick this point. I'm going to draw from that point there, basically up to the corner, and then up to the corner. And you create 1, 2, 3 triangles. But the triangle we're interested in is this one. And I want you to tell me how many squares are in that triangle. Now, if you on your table, if you do different ones, right? So don't do all the same one. If you're the only person on the table, you can do it a couple of times. Just so you're aware, this is an example criterion B assessment. So I could tell you now how I would go about counting the squares, because it goes through. You're supposed to come up with an idea for yourself. How many squares are in this triangle? And compare that to the people around you, or if you do it more than once, what do you notice? That's what we're looking for a criteria. So I'm not just telling you the answer, you're trying to discover something for yourself. So you do that one, you might do a different one, do like up to there and up to there instead, yeah? Or I might choose to do there, there. You count the squares. So I want you to count the squares in this, right, triangle. How many squares are in that triangle? Now I can tell you, it's not going to be a decimal. It's actually a whole number. Okay? How many squares are there? You need to figure it out. How are you going to go about figuring out how many squares are in that? And then if you have done it right, what does it tell you? Right, so what I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, is one way, if you're struggling to figure out how to count the squares, is I would actually think, right, let's cut that in half. How many squares are in here? The whole thing, this half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this line cuts it in half. So how many in this part? 4. Yeah. This side has 16, but we've cut it in half. So how many in this bit? What's half of 16? 8. So if I put those together, 4 plus 8 makes 12 squares in this triangle. What do you notice?
It's that for everyone.
Right? So I think what Skyler pointed out was he thinks that's always going to be the case. That's the whole point of criterion B. So if we look at, and if you need to put lessons almost over, but if we look at a rectangle, and I'm going to do a 1, 2, 3, I'm going to do a 6 by 3. How many squares? 6 by 3 is 18. Now if I do this and have it, what's the area do you think of this? It's going to be 9 squares. So, you are correct in that a triangle is always half of the rectangle that it fits inside. Half. So let's have a look at what that means to, let's have a look what that means to a question like this. Okay, are you on this page? You will look like you've got it in front of you, you pencil out, just quickly. Alright, now what I'm going to do is this. However you want to do this, I'm going to turn this into the rectangle. Yeah? So that triangle is now part. So if I was going to do this one, I would turn this one into the rectangle. Okay. What do you think the area of this triangle would be? It's going to be 10 times 8, but we only want half of that. And how do we get half of it? We divide it by 2. So the area would be 80 divided by 2 is 40 square meters. So the triangle is half of the rectangle it fits in. Okay? Okay? It will always be half, yeah. Now it starts getting a little bit more tricky to think about, like when it's like this.
Wait, Dad, how's it half?
Well, that's what we were just doing on this piece of work.
Because it's.
We noticed that the whole rectangle is 24, but the triangle was only 12. And Skylar said, right, he thinks it's always going to be half.
It's actually like.
And he's correct.
That's the thing.
He is actually correct. The triangle, the area of the triangle will be half the rectangle that fits inside. Guys, stay focused and don't move on to the bottom. So, for instance, how would I work out the area of this? If I get rid of that rectangle, how would I do it? The area is 3 times 1.9, but we have to divide it by 2. Yeah? Good to you? Just do 3, 1.9.
2.85.
2.85. 2.85 square mile. Just one final one before we head to lunch. Trickier one. What do you reckon for this one?
I think it's the same thing.
Go on then, what you tell me what it's going to be. 6 times 5 divided by 2. Area is 15 square meters. So we'll carry on. Can I ask you to finish those sheets off for homework? Give you a couple of days. I'll put it on maths right now, but I'll give you a couple of days and we'll move on to the next thing next time. Simple enough, right? Go on to other shapes. We just needed rectangles to make sure it's done.